Hello everybody, welcome to another EdChat with Erin, and I'm here joined today with Deanne Sherrod. She's one of our counselors here at Temple City High School. Welcome.
Thank you.
I wanted to talk to you a little bit today about restorative practices. I know we went to a training a few months ago on restorative practices put on by IIRP, and it's all about relationships, which I really appreciate about restorative practices. Can you tell us a little bit more?
Yes, the International Institute for Restorative Practices is actually found worldwide. They do have a headquarters in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and they offer trainings in restorative practices in businesses, but predominantly in schools.
Great. And it sounds like restorative practices, and as I've mentioned, is mainly about relationships. Why are relationships so important?
What they talk about in restorative practices is that relationships should be the primary focus. So for example, I'll start with the story from this year. I had a teacher contact me at the end of this year feeling very discouraged because a student had left his room after the final, calling him unfair. The reason that the teacher felt so bad, he called me as a school counselor and said, is there anything about this student that you could share with me because I'm feeling just so terrible about this comment. She had a 0 period. I excused a lot of truants and tardies and lateness for her due to some issues she disclosed to him. And he said, I picked up her final because we were literally out of time. And he said she was so angry and accused me of being unfair, and it was so hurtful. Fortunately, we had a couple days left before school was out, so I called the student in. And I asked the student about the comment and ran an attendance report for the student showing her all of the truants and absences during the school year and explained the policy and added that if there was any unfairness, it was probably to the other students in the class who had been made to show up on time, that several allowances had been made for her. And she felt bad about it, and the main focus, as I said, aside from the rules and regulations and this discussion we're having, that relationship with your teacher, I'm sure, is very important to you. Is there anything that you feel you could do to restore this relationship because he's actually feeling quite hurt about what happened? And I didn't lead her. The idea is not that you tell them what to do, but that you support them in always restoring the relationship. She made the decision on her own to go back to his room and have a conversation with him. He wasn't there at the time, so she left a note, but he called later and said how much better it made him feel that she took the time to write that note and make sure that relationship was repaired before they ended for the school year.
Thanks for telling us that story. And I think a lot of people listening, or people who may be looking at restorative practices from the outside, may think that it looks like a lot of conversations, and maybe the discipline part of learning isn't there. And so I'd like to ask you a few questions. If you can tell us a little bit more about the social discipline window, which I believe is the foundation of restorative practices. If you can tell us a little bit more about that and how it applies to restorative practices.
I would love to do that. And first of all, let me start by saying that when we think about how much time it takes to work with students, formal conferences require phone calls, setting up our calendars, making sure that everything matches. And so if we can restore relationships before they get to the point that we need formal conferences, we're actually saving time in the long run. But going back to your social discipline window, for those of you that are looking at this, you're going to see 4 boxes. If you look at the high to low on the left, we're talking about the axis of low control going to the highest amount of control on me, or we could say discipline, and then, or pressure. And then we would go low to high on support. So how much are we encouraging? How much are we nurturing and restoring students when they misbehave? So the idea is that we want to have a consequence, but along with the consequence, we want to restore them back into the community so that they don't feel like they're now on the fringe, because we know that kids that band together on the fringe of school or on the fringe of society, usually positive things don't come out of that. So let's take a look at the 2 box. The 2 boxes, the top left, we see high control and we see low support. So that would be administering a discipline or administering a consequence, maybe just suspending and sending them home, and no support at all. So we think of a student who maybe gets suspended and goes home, that can be a party. That can be, I'm going to play video games, I'm going to watch TV, and really there isn't anything done other than sending the student out of school. There's nothing done to restore the student or teach the student or form any sort of school community. You broke the rule, you're out. If you look at the bottom left, you're going to see neglectful, so that would be ignoring behaviors. If you think of parenting and you look at this from a parenting lens, it would be the parent who does nothing. I don't see it, I'm going to look the other way. So the student doesn't learn anything, and the student is allowed to continue with the bad behavior, which often will encourage other students in the classroom to behave poorly as well. If you look at the bottom right, you'll see that in this window we have high support but very low control. So doing things for people. Initially, even from a counseling perspective, we might say, well, I'm just helping them along. They come from a difficult background, or they have a lot of issues. I know this is a box that personally I struggle with, because if I have to identify myself as erring, I mostly err in the 4 box. But a good way to look at the 4 box is that if you are doing things for people, especially for students, you're giving them the message that you don't believe they can do it for themselves. And that's more about the person that's offering the help than it is about helping the student. If you look at the width box, we see high control and we see high support. So what that might look like is a student misbehaves in the classroom. There may be a consequence for that, but we're working very hard at making sure that we also keep that relationship with the student. So the behavior is unacceptable. What can we do together to make sure that this behavior doesn't occur again? So it would have been very easy for the teacher I told you about at the very beginning to say to the student who left from her final that day, well, if you have a need for a letter of recommendation for your university, forget it, you just blew it. Don't come back and ask me for a letter of recommendation, because that relationship was broken. And yes, you could do that. You could do that to the student if you wanted to do that for her misbehavior, her rudeness, however you want to look at that. Or you can restore the relationship and say, it's unacceptable the way you treated me when you left. I did make some exceptions for you, and I'm feeling very hurt that those were not appreciated when you left. However, let's talk about what we can do to restore this relationship, maybe with her apologizing and making sure that things were made right. So again, that would be, there still might be a consequence where the teacher would say, I'm not feeling very comfortable about what happened. And this may not be the best example, but it'll work for the box. And to say, but now things have been restored, and so hopefully both people leave feeling like they were heard and feeling like the relationship is far more important than what occurred.
I'd like to remind our audience too a couple things that I heard from what you said. One is with the time involved with restorative practices. Again, it may look like talking, a lot of talking going on, and it does take a lot of time up front. But again, the goal is to give these students or whoever the skills to be able to work in a classroom and positively and be able to learn from their mistakes.
Mm-hmm. And the idea is there's a companion to the restorative practices, and that's working in circles. That's a separate workshop.
Okay.
But the idea is that the teacher becomes an instructor, but also becomes a life coach. And as the climate in the classroom becomes restorative, students can even tell another student. You'll see examples in the circle on the videos where they will circle up and the students will tell a student who's misbehaving in class, you're interfering with my ability to learn. I really want to learn in this class. But it's not done with a target. It's done with targeting the person and making them feel bad, but letting them know that their behavior does affect others. and that others actually care about, what can we do to make this behavior stop. It is preventing us from being able to learn, but at the same time, we want you with us, and we want you to work with us, so that people don't feel like they're continually being ostracized for bad behavior. And so it takes time, but it changes. The idea is that it changes the climate of the entire school.
Yeah, I like that and appreciate that a lot. And again, we're not saying that there is no discipline ever involved. That's still a part of it. It's holding these students to these high expectations. We're not lowering our expectations, and there still may be suspensions, detention, Saturday school involved. But that now we're giving them the tools and the support to basically learn from these things that may occur. I have one last question before we end today, and that is, what do you feel is so valuable about restorative practices?
What I like about the restorative practices is that it's teaching them real-world transferable skills. So we think about coming to school, and we think about you have to follow the rules, you have to show up, you have to behave in a certain way and get along with everybody. But really, what is school? School is like a microcosm of the rest of the world. So these are going to be the people that go out and they're working in careers, and they're the next generation. So basically what we're doing is we're teaching them about community. And we're not just giving them the content that they need for life, but we're also giving them the communication skills that they need for life. And I think that's something that we've lost in this numbers game. We're starting to look at assessments and numbers, and at my particular school, how many AP classes, how many honors classes, what's your GPA. But then we have students that can't even carry a conversation or understand how their actions might affect others. And so that's an important thing when we look at educating the next generation that we're putting into the community and putting into the world, especially as globally connected as we are now.
Well, thank you so much, Deanne. I'm
You're
really
welcome.
looking forward to using restorative practices more and more next year. I've started to integrate it into my interactions with students, with staff members, between students and staff members, and I think it's a hugely valuable tool. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.